Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tank Talk podcast. So happy you are here with us. We've got a wonderful episode for you today. John and I were talking about it a little bit earlier. We were scratching our heads thinking of said topic. What do we got going on today?
We are going to talk about fish that are, for whatever reason, there's a lot of different reasons, but fish that used to be really popular in the hobby and now not so much.
It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. This hobby goes in waves, so it should be easy to talk about.
And there's a couple different reasons why these fish may have gone out of favor sometimes. And some of these that we're going to have, well, people don't keep them anymore. I don't know why, but there's some other ones where it becomes a little bit obvious. But you know what? Before we get into that, we need to thank our channel sponsor, one of our channel sponsors, and that is Fritz Aquatics. Fritz Aquatics has been partnered with the Tank Talk podcast, KG Tropicals, Primetime Aquatics for a long time. They are a company that sells very, very high quality products like the test kits that they have. I absolutely love this thing. This is the Fritz Master Test Kit, liquid test kit. This is cool because they're pH testing. It is a full range. You don't have to worry about low range and high range pH. Really easy to read the results. They have got high quality water testing kits and additives. I was just at their facility not long ago. Very impressive place. If you haven't checked out Fritz Aquatics, well, then you need to go to keepfishkeeping.com and check them out because there's all kinds of cool stuff there. So big thank you to Fritz. Hope you love them too. Let's get into this thing. What do you got for your first selection?
You know, I had to consult my wife on this one. It was, you brought up the idea for this topic and I was like, wow, that should be easy. But at the same time, let me think about this because, you know, I've been at this for a while. And one of the first ones that popped up in my head is way back in the day. It didn't matter what pet store you went into, you would always find a tank full of red devils. And they were very appealing to me in the beginning. How cool are they? Big, beautiful South American or Central American? Does it really matter? Who cares?
New World cichlid.
Okay, that's, whatever. I don't get caught up in all that kind of stuff. I just call them red devils and I love them. They're very, very cool, but they have a reputation and I've got personal stories of them too. And maybe that's why, or maybe it's just my area that I am in and have always been in. I've always been within 3 hours of where I am now. Maybe they've just fallen out of favor. Maybe it's different for you. I don't know. But I remember it vividly. There would be a tank full of the cutest little peach red color fish. Now you'd be hard pressed to find those tanks full, but maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I bred something very similar. That was the Midas cichlid, red devil. They're very, very similar fish. I personally think they're basically the same fish. And you're right. They're amazing. Great color, great personality. We just had a species only tank. We had a male and female pair in a 75 gallon. Holy cow, they had babies. I did a species profile on that fish. They had like 800 babies. So,
whoa,
but they are not to be trifled with. And I think that's part of the problem. I would venture to say it's not just the red devil / Midas cichlids. A lot of those big bruiser type South American cichlids, if you go to most pet stores, they are not very common. Where just like you, back in the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, the 00s, you'd walk into a pet store. It's like, oh yeah, give me some red devils and some Jack Dempseys, and you'd have this tank where people, these fish are just, they're gonna mess some stuff up. And now you don't see them as often. I think people have learned their lesson, and that is big tanks, lots of aggression. Gonna need some patience to keep them, and you got to be okay with dealing with the squabbles that happen in your aquarium.
Yeah, my personal experience with them, I had a gentleman, and this would have been probably 2011. I don't even know how I became in contact with this person, but this gentleman reached out to me and said, hey, I've got these 2 full-grown red devils. They're gorgeous. I need to get rid of them. Will you take them? And I was like, of course I will. They were absolutely jaw-dropping fish. I've got videos of them on my channel. You got to go way, way, way back. And let me just tell you, if I had in the 150-gallon tank that I had them in, if I had just had those two fish in there, it would have been one of the most magnificent tanks you've ever seen. They are unbelievable. Their color, the shape that they get on their head, and they're absolutely jaw-dropping. The problem was I mixed other fish with them, and that's hit or miss. It may work, it may not. They slaughtered two big fish. One of them we were able to save. Lisa was able to save, and we had for like another 5 years. Had this other fish longer than I did the red devils, but we had a guy come in and surrender a pacu that was like 2 feet long, massive pacu. They absolutely annihilated that fish. I felt so horrible. They can be really nasty, but I feel like if I had just left those two fish alone by themselves, nothing else in the tank, I think it would have been one of the most magnificent tanks anybody's ever seen. So beautiful fish, but watch out.
Yep. And I had the female Midas that we had after we lost the male. She was in a 125 with a bunch of peacock cichlids and random smaller South and Central American cichlids. Left them all alone. Perfect model citizen. So it depends. It just depends on the setup, when they were introduced, their overall size, their temperament. It can be rather challenging.
You're taking a risk, but I think most people know that when they get them.
I thought of one when we were talking about this, since we've last discussed this topic, the Pictus cat.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So when I was younger, again in the 90s, you couldn't walk into a pet store without seeing a tank full of those ridiculously crazy catfish. Pictus cats kind of look like Synodontis. They're silver. They've got black spots. They get to be around, 4 inches or so. Big, long whiskers. And you'd walk in the pet store, they'd just be glass surfing the entire time. One of the most active fish you're going to find. And they used to be everywhere. And I noticed this. I noticed it the last few times I've gone on fish store, just kind of tours and just walking around. I almost never see those fish anymore. The Pictus cat they're still around, but it's not like it used to be where it was almost everybody had at least one at some point in their aquariums. And I think it's because people realize, they're really active, but they can also be a little bit feisty and a little bit fin-nippy too. So I don't know if that's why they went away, but you just don't see them like you used to.
I feel like the same can be said for a lot of the catfish species that we keep in aquariums. We have another one on our list that we'll be getting to eventually, but yeah, I think people figured out catfish for the most part, unless we're talking about, the Corydoras and the common or bristlenose plecos and things like that, specialty plecos. Catfish really don't belong in aquariums. Most of them. Pictus cats, Synodontis, they're small. We don't have the same problems that you would a red-tailed cat. But I feel like they may be one of the reasons why they have fallen off is because there's just that stigma attached to catfish in general that, people see a noodling video on YouTube and they're like, that thing is as big as somebody's arm. There's no way it's going to be able to be kept in an aquarium. Maybe that's why. But that's one, I'm glad you brought that fish up because it's so active and it's just so fun to watch. It surprises me that we don't see them much anymore. But you're right. I don't see them in my area either. Not the way it used to be, where you would always see. But it was not just the Pictus. It was a lot of different catfish that you would just see. Even a tank full of red-tailed cats that are only that big. You would see that all the time, and it seems like it's across the board. Catfish, not as much anymore.
Another one, that upside down catfish. They used to be everywhere. You couldn't walk into a pet store without, everybody wanted, it's the upside down catfish, and that's another one where you very rarely see them anymore.
Yeah, and it's a shame because they're so cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know that I've ever even kept a Pictus cat, so I don't know that I have any more information to add to that one. If I'm being honest with you,
they're just not around anymore. It's a crazy thing. Active, a little bit fin-nippy, and keep them in a group. And I guess a lot of people learn their lesson. All right, what's your next one?
Well, are we going to keep? We discussed this briefly, and then we had some internet issues, and so it's been a couple hours since we talked about it. Were we just going to lump all of the big South and Central
I think
Americans
so.
in that
Yeah, I
one?
think so. You know, we talked
Because
about Midas, Red Devil, the Jack Dempseys, you mentioned Dovi. Those are just the big bruiser South Central American cichlids. They're just not around as much as they used to be. But the Red Terror would be another one.
Green Terror, one of my, I
Yep.
absolutely love those. Magnificent when they get big, which most of these fish are. Maybe not Dovi. I don't think Dovi are the most attractive fish when they get huge, but this is another thing where I do believe people have just gotten wiser.
Yeah.
And when you and I were younger, we didn't know. We didn't realize that a red-tailed cat was going to get 100 pounds. And, people fish for these for competitions. I mean, we didn't know that kind of stuff, or at least I didn't. You've always been smarter than me, but you didn't know that silver arowanas could potentially, I've never seen one, but could get 4 feet long. You just got whatever you wanted to get. And I think that because of social media, because of the access to information that we have being unlimited now, I think people have just gotten smart. And so they're like, well, that wolf cichlid, the Dovi, is really cool, but I can't keep that in my 29 gallon, which surprises me because I went to a store. I won't name the store. I don't even know if they're still in business, but this was probably 10 years ago. I went to a random fish store and they had spawned Dovi multiple times intentionally. And I swear to you, they had probably 50 tanks that were full of nothing but Dovi. And I remember thinking then, 10 years ago, how in the world are they going to get rid of all of those fried? Nobody wants those fish. I mean, you got to be a crazy person with a ridiculously sized tank and accept the fact that that's the only fish that's going to be in it. Nobody wants that. I think it's knowing that the fish get too big, and also most of those fish are going to need to be kept independent from all the others because they're going to beat each other up. People are just over that. And so that whole movement, I think, has kind of lost its luster. Thankfully, there are people out there like Predatory Fins that are kind of specializing in that. So if you do want to do it, you still can, but it takes a special kind of crazy to keep those fish.
And I think part of it too is we found better options. You know, things like Geophagus. You've got the Oscars behind you, which yeah, they're big, but they're not super aggressive. You've got Severums, which you had in that tank in the past, and so you've got these options where people are learning. I can still get pretty large cichlids that don't have to wipe out everything else in the tank, and they can work well in a large, semi-peaceful South Central American cichlid tank, and even with non-cichlids sometimes.
Sure. And they're beautiful. I
Yeah.
mean, the Severum is the poor man's discus. I've always called it that. I mean, gorgeous personalities, beautiful. I mean, and some of those big bruisers, like the Dovis, they're cool, but they're not. You wouldn't look at it and say, "Oh, that's gorgeous." You would say a red devil, a Midas, a Texas cichlid. A lot of those green terrors. Oh, that's beautiful, but maybe not the Dovi.
Yeah.
And on the topic of discus, it's not my turn. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It is your turn. Yeah, because I said Pictus. You're
Oh,
up.
okay. Well, yeah, I kind of bailed out there because I was talking about the South and Centrals. Well, let's start a little bit of controversy, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with me here, and and I hope people understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. I'm not saying you never see these anymore. I'm not saying they're terrible fish to keep. I'm just saying they're not as popular. There used to be a time on the internet where everywhere you went, you saw discus. I was just mentioning them. Now, not so much. And I don't think it's for any reason other than the roller coaster ride that is this hobby that we're on. You have trends, things become popular, and then they fade off, and then they come back. Discus, among others that we're going to have on our list here today, they will be back. I promise you that. But right now, they're not as popular. And, I could go all personal and give my reason, one of my reasons why I think they're not. But I think I'm going to avoid that because I don't feel like making enemies here today. But, discus were a lot popular. And then something happened. and they weren't as popular.
Well, I think it's like anything else. It goes through cycles. People keep discus and they realize, okay, I got to keep these fish a little bit warmer to keep them happy. It would be nice if they had water that was a little bit on the softer side, a little bit lower pH. Is it required? Not necessarily, but again, that's where they're going to thrive. You've got compatibility issues with other fish that are going to like all those water parameters, and you've got to figure out your tank situation there. They are somewhat more prone to stress and therefore prone to weakened immune systems, and maybe a little bit more prone to disease, and maybe a little bit more in terms of keeping sure your water parameters are on the closer to ideal side. So, and not to mention the fact they're really expensive retail. I mean, that could be a major thing. So imagine, I think what's happened is you've got a generation of fish keepers who fell in love with discus because of the color, many of which maybe didn't have the fish keeping experience they needed in order to allow discus to thrive, which they absolutely can. And you know that because you've kept them before.
Oh yeah.
However, when you make the mistake of spending $80, $90, $100 on a discus that is still a juvenile, and then struggle to keep them alive, or maybe you lose them after a year or two, or your tank crashes, or it really doesn't even crash. Most fish would be like, oh, whatever. But for discus, it's like, oh, something was, just a little bit off and I lost $1,000 worth of fish. It's like, well, yeah, I don't feel like feeling that pain again. So I'm going to stay away from
mistake you only make once.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I said I wasn't going to bring it up, but there was a particular producer of discus that was making what I believed was, and I still do believe, the hardiest discus out there. But like you said, you were paying a fortune. You could buy them from this distributor the size of an IHOP pancake, or you could buy them really small, but either way, you were paying big money, and they were a lot more forgiving and a lot easier to keep. And I think that producer really helped the popularity of that fish, because more people could be successful. And because they got popular, then other places started breeding them more rapidly. The quality wasn't quite as there, so they became all of a sudden really sensitive again, and it just started a whole big thing. And I think probably this one is the easiest. I think it is price. I think, it's like, okay, I tried discus. I dropped, like you said, $1,000 on 6 fish, and then they all died, and I'm never going to do that again. I'll just go buy $4 and $8 rasboras and be over it. I think that is, I could get into politics, but I'm not going to. I think price drove people away from that. And, it's a shame. They are one of the most beautiful fish in the hobby. They are a ooh fish. That's the way I describe them. People who don't keep fish come into your house, see a tank full of discus, they go, ooh. Mm-hmm. And so it surprises me that they're not still one of the most popular. But I say it again, they will be back. It's a guarantee. They might be back by the time this episode uploads. Who knows? But they're coming back because they're too beautiful and too adorable to not be one of the most popular fish out there, and the most photogenic, because they don't really do anything.
Yeah.
Just look pretty.
So my next pick is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the hatchetfish. They're still around. You can still walk into many pet stores and you can find the silvers or the marbles. But when I was a kid, the silver hatchetfish was everywhere. And it just seemed like every time I walked into a house, people had them. They're fish that basically have a straight upper part of their body. They're designed just to kind of sit there at the top of the water. And people who want top water fish, or upper water fish, man, the hatchetfish was like a no-brainer. And I kept those for a very long time. And I found the silvers to be pretty darn hardy. The problem is that they would jump, and so you had to have a nice tight fitting cover. And I still, to this day, I don't know why more people aren't talking about them. I mean, you never hear them, in terms of stocking lists, or, oh, look what I just got. I just picked up a dozen hatchetfish. And it's crazy to me, but yeah, they're around, but I don't think there's a whole lot of interest in them like there used to be.
You say they're around, but you recently added that to our list. I didn't see that one coming. I don't recall the last time I saw one of those, really? or a tank of those in a fish store. And again, a lot of this is based on region, but I can't recall the last time. And I know when they were popular, I was into the fish that would eat them. So I never had them. But I always thought they were really cool because they're really unique. I mean, it's a unique shaped fish. I think it's cool how they hang out up at the top. But at the time when they were at their peak of popularity, I was keeping arowanas. So they wouldn't have lasted long in my tank. But yeah, that is fascinating because I do not recall the last time I saw those in a fish store. And I've been to some fish stores that have 500 tanks, and I don't recall seeing hatchetfish. So, yeah, good pull on that one. I don't have much more to add. I feel like such a severe case of imposter syndrome happening in here.
No way, man.
Today for me.
Bring it. Bring your next one.
I'm gonna go really, really simple here. Again, it's another one. When I started on YouTube, you could not be on YouTube for longer than 3 minutes without seeing an African cichlid video. And I mean, my channel for the first couple of years, that's all I talked about was African cichlids. You have channels like Jay Wilson and Ben Ochart and the list, I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole lot of them. There were so many African cichlid channels. Mm-hmm. And, I drifted away from them because I realized, I was limited as far as what I could talk about if that's all I talked about. But it seems like now they're still out there. I've still got 2 tanks full of them, and I know a lot of people who do too, but they just don't seem to have that luster that they did. But this is another one like Discus. They'll be back. And I think they're actually on the comeback as we speak. But that might just be fantasy for me. I don't know. I could be wrong there.
And I think what helps the African cichlid if they're going to make a comeback is just education. Again, just like we talked about with the South and Central American cichlids, when you're keeping if our focus is Lake Malawi African cichlids, the peacocks, haps, and Mbuna, the problem is, of course, managing aggression. The fact that you're keeping a cichlid tank, so you're not adding a lot of other different types of fish. The fact, like we talked about, okay, well, you want male for peacock because the females are brown and tan. So now you got to manage the male aggression, which means you need a larger tank and overstock them. And so there's some limiting factors. As you start to keep them correctly, you realize, hey, I need a 6-foot tank for these peacocks and haps. I need to overstock it. I need great filtration. If I'm going to do Mbuna, same thing, overstock it. But if I pick the wrong ones, it's going to be an absolute mess. Peacocks, when they're fully colored up, just like the discus are, they're expensive. Right. So retail, it's not uncommon to pay $40, $50, $60 for a colored up male. Now, for us at our swaps, we can pay a lot less. But even there, and that's where I noticed it the most. It's so funny. When I first started going to the GCCA, Greater Chicago Cichlid Association swap, that's the group. Back in the day, when they ran their swaps, you'd walk in there, and if you loved cichlids, you were in great shape. And so I guess that would have been late 00s, early teens. You'd walk in there, and it was mostly all the people were selling African cichlids, some South and Central American, but it was a cichlid swap.
Yep.
Shift even probably late teens going into now. If you walked into that same swap today, I wouldn't. If 25% of the vendors there are selling cichlids, I would be surprised. It's almost all nanofish and live bearers and snails and shrimp. And and I've seen people comment, I go to a GCCA swap and I can't find the cichlids I want. I just think that those fish, people have learned that they can be a little bit more to manage.
It is. And I think that most people now, including myself, although I still keep Africans, we want simplicity. We don't want the hassle of, it's hard enough to keep an aquarium looking nice as it is, but then you got to deal with these fish wanting to beat each other up, and you got to spend $80 a piece for them. And it's like, good Lord. I mean, I just want simplicity. And so staying away from them, it absolutely makes sense. I don't want to use the lazy word because I think that would be unfair, but it takes a special kind of person to be involved in this because they are massive waste producers. They are aggressive, but the reward that you get for doing all of that work and for dealing with what you have to deal with, is second to very little. And that's why I say there's no way you're going to keep them down. I mean, they're coming back, but it's just a matter of when. You go to a pet store now. There's a store in Glen Burnie, Maryland that's called House of Tropicals. Anybody that is within a couple hours of that store, I would recommend going to it because it's the biggest fish store I've ever been to. 500 tanks with fish in it. And I remember the last time I was up there, there was maybe like 6 that had Africans in it. And everything else was, they had a small oddball section too with the arowanas and the big fish. But back, like you were saying, late 2000s, early teens, half the store was African cichlids.
Yeah.
And, so it's just one of those things. I think people want simplicity. And it's a lot easier when you lose as mean as it is to say, when you lose a $4 tetra, that's a lot easier to deal with than you put in a $60 fish that's absolutely gorgeous and the next day it's dead because it got beat up by all the other fish in the tank. Mm-hmm. I get it, but it is very, very sad. It makes me sad, but they're coming back. It's only a matter of time.
And it's funny you mention that because there are fish stores around me. You won't find a single African cichlid in the entire store. It's all community fish and planted tanks and nano, which I love. I mean, I totally understand that, but yeah, the shift has been pretty dramatic.
I think the store that is, notoriously my favorite store, Aquariums Unlimited, they might have one, and it's like a mixed African cichlid tank, which usually means it's in Bunas.
Yeah.
And it, that's not because the owner doesn't like Africans. It's, stores they want to keep in their tanks what people are going to buy. And, it makes me very sad, but there's plenty of places out there that you can get them, but you normally have to go online. You have to go to a Ron Cichlids or a Cunningham or Imperial Tropicals. Yeah. The list goes on. You can find them, but you just might not find them at your fish store. And that makes me sad.
Next one for me.
Don't you steal my other one.
The Chinese algae eater. The Chinese algae eater. That was another one when we were kids. You basically always had Chinese algae eaters because that was your algae eating fish. And when they're small, they're brown. They've got kind of like that checkerboard pattern along the sides. Usually when they're small, they're not terrible citizens in an aquarium. But people learned, holy cow, this fish can get large, like 8 inches, maybe even larger sometimes. And when they get larger, they get territorial. They start attacking other fish. They will definitely attack one another. And it's just one of those things where people were using Chinese algae eaters as algae control in community tanks and tanks that were too small and wound up paying the price for them. And thus not nearly, I mean, you could remember when you could walk into a Petco and a PetSmart, there'd be a whole tank filled with those things back in the
everywhere.
O's.
Yeah. And I have had those in the past. This is embarrassing, but I was 19, so give me a break. I can remember putting them in my arowana tank thinking, I mean, they're really fast. They're really small. I need help cleaning my tank and I'm too lazy to do it myself. Well, that didn't end well. But, and because you would always find them, they'd be an inch, tiny, and they have that big sucker on the end and they're cool. I just, I don't know what I was thinking with that, but they were always cheap and, you looked at them as little workers. And now I think people have, again, gotten smarter and realized aquarium is not a lazy man's hobby. You got to do the work. You're not going to be able to depend on fish to do it for you. And if they are, they're going to turn to things that are not going to be so troublesome, like snails and shrimp and things like that. I don't know anybody right now that would choose a Chinese algae eater over a snail when it comes to algae control and stuff like that right now. So,
or bristlenose pleco for that matter. I think the popularity of the bristlenose pleco is directly related to the lack of popularity of the Chinese algae eater.
Yep. I could not agree more.
But what's funny about that fish? You mentioned African cichlids. That to me was the really good setup is you had African cichlids with Chinese algae eaters, and they, for me, always got along really well. And they would still eat algae even at that larger size because of the amount of food competition in those tanks. They worked out very well there, but other than that, or the South Central American cichlids, as long as those fish weren't big enough to eat the Chinese algae eaters, that was a pretty decent setup.
I've always wondered, I've never tried this, but I've always wondered if you even put little ones in with, like, my Oscars are super slow and derpy and lazy right now. If I was to put Chinese algae eaters in there, which I don't know where I'd get them, but if I was to put them in there, I bet you they'd survive because they're so fast. And, but I don't get excited. I'm not going to do it. But I've always wondered because almost all big cichlids are, in an aquarium, they're slow. And so would they even be able to catch the Chinese algae eaters? I don't know.
I think in time they would. It would be harder in a tank that size because they'd have to swim. The Oscars would have to swim a lot further to catch them. But in your standard like 125, I'd say give them time, and they would opportunistically be like, "Oh, he's not looking over.
Yep.
Gone." Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my arowana did. Arowanas are fascinating, the way they strike like a snake. I mean, so you're not going to be too fast for them, but I don't think my Oscars would even pay them the time of day. I have the only Oscars on planet Earth that didn't even eat ram's horn snails, so they're not going to eat Chinese algae eaters for sure.
So what you got next?
Well, my next one that I was desperately hoping you did not steal from me is a fish that I think, I don't know. It would be difficult to make a list of what is the most popular aquarium fish, but it was one of the most popular for quite some time. And now, I don't remember the last time I saw them. Silver dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife brought that up, and I was like, thank you, because that does make sense. I didn't even think about it. They're magnificent the way they school, and they're all around each other, and they're not the most beautiful fish in the world, but they're really cool, and you used to see them all over the place. Now, I don't remember the last time Joey did one. The King of DIY did a silver dollar tank probably 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah. Other than that, I don't know that I've seen one on social media, but I guess I haven't been looking either.
Well, it's funny you mention that because by the time this video comes out, most likely my silver dollar species profile will be released because I got some really good footage.
Nice.
And I've got a group in my 125. I have 5 of them. And I can tell you, one, people realize silver dollars are super skittish. And so if you're not real careful, they'll go bouncing off the glass and your decorations and get all beat up. And 2, man, they can be really tough on one another. Full disclosure, I got B-roll from a completely different source because my silver dollars have beaten the snot out of one another. I'm like, I can't put these on a video. I mean, the tails are all, there's 2 of them or the tail's half missing and all this stuff. And that particular group is really, really hard on one another. I'm not saying they always are, but they can be. And the other thing is when they're not bouncing around the tank because they're startled, they're actually really boring. They just kind of, almost like the piranha, they just kind of sit there and they'll swim back and forth, but they're not a super tight schooler unless you've got a bigger group. The other thing, the really cool ones like the red hooks and what is that? The like a black, is it the blueberry or black line silver dollar? What's the one with the spots? Probably just a spotted silver dollar. There's different variants and they're gorgeous fish, really pretty. Problem is, again, they get really expensive. And I remember even just to import like the red hooks and the spotted silver dollars, they were very expensive. They don't travel well. They freak out. Your tank is low on oxygen. That's going to be one of the first fish that are, come out, I'm dead. So a lot of problems there. And again, planted tanks are all the rage. And you put silver dollars in a planted tank, you will not have plants anymore. I have never seen a plant that doesn't eat, or I've never seen a plant that survives in the presence of a silver dollar. They eat everything. Java moss, Java fern, Anubias, hornwort. I used to feed our silver dollars hornwort, and I still do sometimes. Duckweed, it's all gone. So if you don't like planted tanks, if you've got a cichlid tank, you're like, all right, I just want some schooling fish, that might work. Get a big group, get a big tank. It'll work out okay.
Yeah, I had them a long, long, long time ago. So long ago, I don't even remember. I couldn't tell you how many I had or anything like that. But that was just like it was one of those fish that was like goldfish. It was just like a standard staple in the hobby that you saw all the time. Now, I mean, you've got them, so you could tell me, but you'd probably, if you went into a fish store and you were like, hey, can I get a group of silver dollars? The owner would be like, huh, I don't even know where to get those. But I could be wrong, but
Yeah. Around us, you can still find them, but they are not a popular fish. And I think part of that too is if you really want to keep them correctly, you need a 6 foot tank. And I know it sounds crazy to say because people will put them in a 29 gallon. Like, no, 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 no. When they're full grown, they will be larger than the palm of your hand. Their bodies will be. And they need to be kept in groups. And because of their activity level, especially if they're, getting a little scared, they need a 6 foot tank. Anything smaller than that, and it will look cramped.
yeah, I mean, I love them, and I big props to Joey for, for doing what he did a while back, and he's been somebody like me that will see a fish not be as popular, and he'll do it just because he wants to show, hey, look, these fish may not be popular, but they should be.
Yeah.
I don't have the guts to do that. I had the guts to do it with Oscars and Yellow Labs, but I don't know that I have the guts to do that with silver dollars. But yeah,
Well, my next
magnificent
one,
fish.
my next one is along the lines of the silver dollar. It used to be everywhere. I almost never see them anymore. I've seen them at one fish store probably in the last close to 6 years. The iridescent shark.
Oh boy.
I don't know if you've ever kept them. I did back in the 80s, the 90s, maybe even the early 00s. And it was typically one of those things. They only grow to the size of your tank. You buy them, they're usually around 3 inches or so. Holy cow. I don't think people really truly understand what they are buying when they buy those fish. Your 6 foot tank, not big enough. That tank you
Mm-hmm.
got behind you, what is that? A
360,
something?
8 feet
Not
by
even
3 feet by
close
2.
to being big enough. Those fish, I've seen them. I have seen them reach 4 feet in length. 4 feet.
That's
And they're
gargantuan.
like a foot wide and like a foot tall. These are massive, 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 massive fish. And oh, by the way, they should be kept in groups.
Yeah. Yeah, and that one, along with completely different scenario, but rainbow sharks and anything with the name shark, to me, it's so easy to understand why they would be big sellers and, just fly out the door. It's always been a pet peeve of mine. It's like, why is it even called shark? I don't get it. I don't understand that. The only thing is, mommy, I want a shark. That's the only thing I can think of that they would call them sharks, but maybe there's a scientific reason. I don't know. But
No.
yeah, that one is one that will fool you. And I too have made the mistake of keeping them in a 29 gallon. But the reason why was because I had a silver arowana. And I would go to the pet store. We didn't know anything. We didn't have unlimited access to information. So you just trusted what the fish store told you. And I remember vividly going in saying, I want something to keep with my arowana. And the person at the fish store was like, iridescent shark. How perfect is that? They get way bigger than arowanas, but he didn't tell me that. It was just like, hey, this will go perfect with arowanas. Never asked me what size tank I had, anything like that, because nobody cared back then.
Yeah.
It was, an iridescent, just one, in a 29 with a silver arowana, neither of which belonged in there. But yeah, I fell for that. I fell for, oh, that's cool. A shark? Neat. I can do that. What a big mistake. So that's one that I understand why it's not as popular anymore. And another one, I don't remember the last time I saw him in a fish store, but
Yeah.
I also wasn't looking. So
The only places I've been to that properly keep those fish are public aquariums and Ohio Fish Rescue. That's it. And Ohio Fish Rescue has tanks that are thousands of gallons. He's got
yep.
the in-ground pool with Arapaima swimming around in there. But in public aquariums, that's about it for the most part, because the fish and probably predatory fins. I think he had an albino, and so did Big Rich at Ohio Fish Rescue. When you've got tanks that are thousands of gallons, yeah, you're good. But
Yeah.
almost nobody has that.
Predatory fins just got in 2 new tanks. One of them is 40 feet long and the other one is 30 feet long.
Nice.
You want to talk about an example of people that are doing it right? Those people are few and far between.
Yeah.
Ohio Fish Rescue, Big Rich is a crazy person. We both know that. His whole house is, you have to be that level of crazy to be able to keep that. And I love Rich. Don't get me wrong. Rich is a friend. I say that lovingly, that he's a crazy person. He really is a crazy person. But, you have to be that level of crazy to keep fish that could potentially get that big. I don't know. Maybe I've seen them in a public aquarium. I don't know that I've ever seen them at that full 4 feet in length, but I have no doubt they can get there. And
Yep.
I don't know anybody not named Big Rich or Rod from Predatory Fins that's capable of keeping those. They're too outrageous.
Yeah.
I guess it's my turn.
It's your turn. Bring it.
I'm going to save one that's on here that is indeed another one that was from my wife. And I want to bring one up that I just thought of. See, my brain works interesting sometimes. This is a fish that has always been on the down low. As far as you didn't see them in everybody's tanks, but you always saw them. And you always saw them about this big. But people didn't realize that they get this big. That's the Datenoid.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That I've never seen them in a fish store bigger than that. I mean, they're always tiny. They grow at the pace of a snail. They grow super slow. But if you were to ever see one in its glory, they're unbelievable. That's one. When you said the only place I've seen one is at a public aquarium, I've seen fully matured and fully grown Datenoids, and it's like, holy cow, that's what I have, and it's that big. That's a surprising one. I'm not going to say it's one of the most popular fish ever, but it is one that I would see regularly. I even sold them in my fish store. Shame on me. But yeah, I don't see anybody. Not only do I not see them available in fish stores, I don't hear anybody talking about them. I don't see them anywhere. So,
Nope.
And it's a shame because they're beautiful, gorgeous.
Yeah. And they are a big fish. I think I was at the Cleveland Aquarium, which is a really, really good aquarium if you're into freshwater fish, like most of us are. And they had Datenoids there that were basically full grown. I don't remember the size of that tank, many, 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 many hundreds of gallons, maybe 1,000 gallons. And I thought that the Datenoids might have been in with a giant Gourami. It was a stunning display, but huge fish.
Giant Gourami is another one that we haven't talked about, and that's
That's never been popular.
No. Sorry, you made me get choked up there. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Anyway, we don't need to spend time on giant gouramis because they've never been popular and probably never will because of the name giant. People know.
Right. I'm going to have to steal one from you if you don't mind.
I really hope it's not the only other one that I was going to talk about, but if it is, that's
Wait,
fine.
are you down to your last one?
Because
I'm out, man. At least then you just go. You go ahead.
We'll
I don't
share the last
No,
one.
you've
It's
got
fine.
one left. You've got one left.
Go ahead.
Besides
It's your
that.
turn anyway. Fair is fair. Go ahead.
All right. So I was going to say the glass cat because you had said it, but you've still got one if you look at the list. So it starts with a B.
Did I put that on there or did you?
You put that on.
Yeah.
So glass cat for me, I've got a group of them. I just did a species profile a couple months on them. They're in the 125. I love those fish. I was, you were saying that you and Lisa were coming up with a list, and I'm like, glass cats was like the number one I always go to. Everybody had that fish in the 80s, everybody, and they had a group of them. I've always found them to be extremely hardy, and I hear people these days be like, oh, the glass cats, you got to give them live food or you got to get them acclimated. I'm like, to me, the glass cat has always been one of those fish. You put it in a tank, and if a tank starts to devolve or something like that, I've seen people where they just stop caring about their fish tank and just let it go, and the water evaporates. It's got like 25% of the water left, and I can pretty much guarantee you if there's any fish that are still going to be there when you actually look at the aquarium, it's probably going to be a glass cat. But really great fish. You can see right through them. got to keep them in groups. They can be skittish. They can be a little bit reclusive. And so they got to be super comfortable. Luckily, mine are. And so they're out pretty much all the time. But I think that's one of the reasons why people stop keeping them is like, well, these fish are constantly hiding and, well, they're see-through.
But the see-through, I mean, if that's not appealing, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, that's the coolest thing. It looks like something from another planet. It just doesn't make any sense. Why is this thing, how can you see through it? That's what makes them appealing to me. And I do think glass cats are a fish that is great for, I know this contradicts what I've said in the past, but for appealing to kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said I'm absolutely for responsible kids keeping fish. That's the only way this hobby survives. That's a great fish to bring them in the door. Like, are you kidding me? I can see the bones in that fish. That's the coolest thing ever. And I think that's what made them so popular back in the day. Now maybe kids are just more infatuated with video games and social media than they are with fish tanks, but that's a great fish for getting them interested in it just because of the uniqueness. I mean, you've never seen anything like that. It's so cool. And I don't know how they evolved to be the way they are, but they're really neat.
Well, and I'm surprised that they're not more popular because they do so well in a planted aquarium, and that is all the rage, right? The ecosystems, the planted aquariums. Now, granted, me personally, I'd like to see them in at least a 40 breeder in a group of 8 to 10. Could you get away with a 29 gallon? Sure. But the plant, man, you have glass cats like kind of sneaking through your planted tank. It looks pretty cool.
It's definitely cool. That might be the coolest fish on the list that we've had here today.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe red devils, but still, yeah, I love that one. And I have seen them recently.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like it used to be. I mean, It used to be, you were talking about a fish when we first started talking here. I don't remember, or maybe it was the Pictus Cats, where you would always count on seeing a tank full of them. You would always see the glass cats too. Now, not so much. You might see a few, but it's a shame. I think maybe that's what I'll do. I'll do a tank of glass cats.
Nice.
That'd be fun. I just thought of another one. And so I'm going to let you have that last one on the list.
Okay.
I do recall, I did give that one on the list, but I don't have any experience with that one. So I'm going to let you have that one. But I do have one more that I just thought of. And this is another one. It's not like this is going to be a fish that's impossible to find. They're there. In fact, I think I've seen them recently, but they used to be everywhere. And you would see them in almost every single tank at a fish store. The black ghost knife.
Yes.
Now, maybe I'm just not paying attention, but it seems to me like they are not at the popularity level that they used to be. Everybody used to have them, and I never understood why. I mean, I understand they're striking the way they look. They look like a feather in the tank. Unbelievable. But they just sit there and they almost 100% of the time hide. And the only time they're going to come out is when you're not looking because you're asleep. I've never understood the appeal other than them looking so unique. But I remember them being, every tank at a fish store would have the little tubes and they would be in there and you'd see their little head poking out. But it was like, it was everywhere. Now, not so much.
Yeah, that's a good pick because that is absolutely one. You're right. Back in the 90s and the 00s, that was an impulse buy almost every single time. Didn't matter what size tank you had. I mean, it matters, but back then it's like, oh, I got a 20 gallon. I'm going to get a black ghost knife. But that was the problem. I think I had them a couple of times, but there was two things with them. One, like you said, they always hide. And two, I could never keep them for longer than about 4 months. It just seemed like whatever I was doing at the time, it just didn't work. So I just kind of gave up on them. They were a little bit difficult to feed. And so I just stopped trying.
They're kind of like coolie loaches. When you see them, it's like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. But then they're gone and you don't see them anymore, and very, very fragile. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you something. I think it was your neck of the woods. I think it was Shed Aquarium that I saw. Have you ever seen one of those fully grown?
They're huge. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And you would never expect that because you see them in the fish store that big. and they lose a little bit of that feather like. They still have that shape and they still look like that. But when they're 2 feet long, oh man, you've never seen anything like it. It's the coolest thing ever. But I can't imagine what level of specialist you have to be to keep them for that long to get to that size, because they're fragile, and it's a shame. But yeah, love that one. I would love to have one. I don't know where I would put it. I would have it just to see if I could get it to that full maturity, because it's one of the coolest things you've ever seen. Yep. The cutest little face you've ever seen on a fish is on the black ghost knife when it's mature. Yeah. Unbelievable.
So last one, it was one that you added, and I thought it was a great add, and that was the butterflyfish. And the butterflyfish, it kind of sits at the top of the tank, kind of like a hatchetfish does, except to me, it's one of the most boring fish on the face of the earth, because it literally just puts its fins out, floats at the top of the tank, and does almost nothing almost all the time. Now, like you, I don't have a ton to offer here, because I've tried keeping them maybe twice, and I never have good luck with them. And so they were hard to get on regular food, if not nearly impossible. They just hang out the top of the tank. They'd find a corner in the tank and they would just sit there. And I'm like, well, and I've seen them at public aquariums. In fact, I just saw them. I don't remember where the heck I was. I don't know if I was in Dallas or somewhere before that. But anyway, it's just the same thing. They just kind of sit there. And I think they can be a little bit aggressive sometimes. So you don't see them the way you used to. And again, that was one of those fish back in the 90s. Everybody had to have the butterfly fish.
Yep. My wife actually is the one that provided that one for our list. And she has always been a fan of them. I don't know if she's ever kept them, if I'm being honest with you. But yeah, it's one of those fish that every time I do see one, I'm like, is that fish okay? Because it's just kind of floating, like you said, and the current will take it away. And it's like, is that even real? Is that one of those little floating kid toys? What is that thing? They're very unique and very cool looking, but I don't know. Never really been my thing, but my wife loves them, and so they'll probably show up in this fish room at some point. But just gonna have to make sure there's not a whole lot of current in that tank.
Yep. Well, that's our list, and so we want to hear from you, because I am sure we have left out a dozen, if not more. What are fish that you saw back in the day, whatever that was, 70s, 80s, 90s, 00s, that just aren't around anymore? You don't see them anymore. Nobody's talking about them anymore. We want to hear from you in the comments section below. As always, thank you very much for being here, and we will see you next week.
And also put in the comments which one you think is going to make the quickest comeback. Which one's coming back first?
Love it.
I have my vote. It's Africans. But anyway, goodbye, everybody.